So I'm talking here with Tony Scherman in his studio. Tony's painting of Poseidon is on the cover of my book and graces the website as well, dedicated to the book. We're going to pursue different kinds of themes to get a sense for issues that he sees are important and his ideas about art. So let me begin by talking about the whole notion of the artistic imagination, which is the title of the chapter in which his painting appears. Is it real? Is it not real? Is it distinctive? Are artists different from other humans?
The imagination, we'll go right off the deep end. Imagination is a metaphysical term, and it's one of those terms that we have to speak about, but it actually is nonsense. All right? Nonsense. Following from Wittgenstein, I actually think that imagination is probably an invention by people who don't make, who aren't creative, and it's a dream wish that is conferred on people that are creative to try and explain part of why the people who are creative, and also probably why people who aren't creative aren't in some way. I don't know, but
one might say that the creative person, the artist, has an image that is unique, that no one has seen before, offers an interpretation of the world. That's all. That's not how it actually happens, though. Well, that's not how it actually works, right? Like that's the indie issue. How does it actually work?
Well, I mean, people, anybody dreams at night and has wildly imaginative dreams, right? You could say that artists are those people who reify those visions, right? But most artists I know don't have visions. I tell you what I think happens. I think that artists see signification.
By that you mean see meaning?
See meaning, but I want to be very precise about what I mean by meaning, right? And they see signification, and then they reify that. But the artistic gesture is in the seeing, and the will to form, if you like, to borrow a phrase from Nietzsche, is maybe how it gets reified.
And by that you mean embodied, expressed.
Yeah, made real.
Because someone might say, reified almost means frozen. You really mean
no, I don't mean
it's quite living. It's quite living.
Reify. I mean as in architects draw and write, and builders reify. Right.
Now we've talked about again in the past and in different conversations the role of encaustic.
Yeah.
As something that's been very special in your style and your work that you trained in England. And for me as a psychologist, encaustic has a very special quality because it invites people in to engage, whether it's a search for being in the work, whether it's an expression of their own being, a kind of dance between the artist working on the piece in relationship to themselves and their lives, and then the viewer working with the piece.
Well, I think what the encaustic does, because it's not paint, and the way I use it like paint, but I mix it with paint. But when I say it, the text of wax, right? This very deep text is not the text of paint. It's not the text of art. It's the text of wax. And text
in this case, you mean the mark?
The text. I mean the history, the full three-dimensional history going back of wax. But what the encaustic does is that it really affirms the surface. Right, when I make a mark with the encaustic, it sits proud on the surface.
Because of the nature of its texture?
Because the wax dries on the surface, and it has a thickness. Right, so that thickness sitting on the surface, which you don't get with oil paint unless you've built it up and built it up and built it up.
And so when they talk about impasto in oil paint, that is the built it up, built it up, built it up. When you work with wax, with paint embedded in it, it is there in and of itself, immediately.
Immediately.
So that's part of an existential statement.
Right.
put it down.
Right. So so I affirm the surface.
Exactly.
But because I paint mimetically,
Meaning?
I make representations. I copy.
Mm-hmm.
I copy things I see.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is that it affirms the surface and denies the surface at the same time, because I'm creating the z-axis down through into the space, the notional space, right? So what the encaustic does is that it magnifies the paradox, right? Way
The
more
2D,
than any
3D
other medium.
paradox.
There's no medium in
There-
the world that magnifies the gap. Right. So what I've done, it's actually a deconstruction of painting in itself, because
The material stands out. It has existential presence. in a
totally
sense.
and undeniably, and it's not manufactured. In other words, it's not. I have not manufactured it. It's just what this stuff does ontologically. Right.
It's big it.
It.
But at the same time, in the act of doing it, and in the act of building,
Yep.
this is where I hesitate to use the word imagination, but this is where your own interpretation of the marks come in. So it's not just as a real fact, but it's in the selection of the colors and the juxtapositions and the texturing that your own interpretation of the work comes in.
I don't interpret my work.
But you have mimetic, but you're doing, if you're doing the particular model and someone else in a different style is doing, in all cases they'd say, well, they're all a little bit mimetic, but your particular kind of mimetic has this existential value of the wax building up a surface, and it's making a certain kind of unique statement as a
Yes.
technique with meaning.
Yes.
And that's part of a vision.
Yeah, I mean,
Well-
I'm not saying that what people call imagination doesn't exist. No, it exists, right?
But
But
embedded
the
in the
construct.
process.
I'm talking about the construct.
100%.
Imagination.
Yes, that's right.
It's a
We're in
construct.
complete agreement.
A linguistic construct.
So let's take a moment
Yeah.
and visit some works to give a sense for what this is about. Okay? So we're talking about the role of encaustic as a medium that sits on the surface, creates an effect in and of itself, and here we have an example of not quite a still life. Where does this relate to the notion of still life?
Well, there's a series called Conversations with the Devil, which are an ongoing series of paintings of flowers that have been cut.
The devil is partly in the dark tonality of the background.
No, it's well, yes and no. I mean, black has the you see, this isn't dark. Okay, so the absence of light, the complete absence of light, is black. Now, very few people actually experience it. You have to go into a completely sealed room with no light at all to actually experience black, right? The rest of the time we call it black, but it isn't black. There's always a little bit of ambient light.
Right.
So black, the color black, can signify the total absence of light, but it can also signify the color black. In other words, it just is black. Right?
So it has this is your point.
So there's double,
symbol.
so there's a double meaning here. Okay, there's the absence of light and just black, and those two things are playing in this painting, because in this area it's just black because the paint's on the surface and you're not seeing any depth, right? You're just seeing surface and you're seeing the color black. When you move over, suddenly this flower is volumetric. It's in front of that flower. Now you have the blackness, which must be by a logical necessity, the absence of light, right? So the painting is moving, right? The flowers themselves, this was something I did years ago on a meditation on Kant's third critique of reason, that the beauty of a flower when cut is a different beauty than the errant beauty of a flower when it's wild. And I said to myself, well, let's say I'm walking down the street to buy some flowers from a florist. The flowers, as they sit in the florist, are floating signifiers. They don't actually have a meaning, but the body is there. The signifier is the body, right? I walk down because I'm going to a funeral. So there's the signification walking down the street. I walk into the shop, I buy the flowers. At that moment, those flowers are a sign. They become a sign, right? This flower, right, signifies funeral. Now, the interesting thing, the moment the flower receives its sign value, right, you can't change the sign value. It becomes sacred in its sign value. So what I did is I went to the funeral and then I put the flowers down, and then I doubled back later on that day and I took the flowers off the funeral and took it to a lover for dinner. As a
gesture, so to speak.
As a gesture, which had it completely
The meaning is ambiguous.
So well, no, the meaning at that point was changed.
Yeah.
I love you, flowers, right? So that was the conversation with the devil, right? Because you can't do that,
So
right?
there's a narrative embedded and hiding behind the story. I come to it in a different way.
Of course you do, because you don't know the story.
That's number one.
Yeah.
But this is a perfect example of the difference between seeing an artist's paintings in a book
Yeah.
versus standing in front of it.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about black, but I'm seeing all the whiteness in it that are floating, and these
yeah.
kinds of images that are embedded
Yeah,
in it that create a certain kind of translucence and a kind of dialogue with this, ontological surface of it black, and it symbolizes this and it means that. But when you walk up to it, you have a completely different experience.
Yeah, well, everything I've said
And
is
the
not,
texture.
this is, everything I've said is analytical,
Yeah.
right? But I don't paint analytically.
So tell me about the experience of.
I just try and get it right. Well, what does that mean?
Well, get it right in terms of the meaning and symbol.
Well, if I painted in oils, I wouldn't have these problems. The point is that my job is to get these flowers to go back into space with volume on
Yeah.
a painted surface. On. They're in and on, right? I look at this, I can't help but see it on, right?
Right.
But I step back here and it's also in. So the drawing, the orthogonal, right, becomes very, very
Salient.
important. Yeah.
Now, we have all this fabulous texture
Yeah.
on the surface. You're playing with the theme of black, or you're pushing us and pulling us in. How do we feel this? I
I don't know how you feel it,
But when you make decisions to.
but I'm not painting it
texture
for you to feel.
I understand, but you're texturing the surface
I'm not texturing it. It's texturing itself.
because the nature, again. Of
Okay, I'll tell you how I paint.
Yeah.
I don't paint. I follow myself painting. My consciousness isn't painting. My consciousness is watching myself paint. Okay?
Yeah.
So I just follow myself, right? And I follow myself into ditches. I follow myself into all kinds of places, right? But my job is to remain awake to how the painting is moving.
So the painting, in a certain sense, paints you.
Yeah.
Because you're absorbed in it, and then you're swimming in it and making decisions. But they're not. Are they decisions or just feelings? I want this, and
No, the feeling thing I want. No, I don't feel a thing when I'm painting in that way, right? The feeling comes through. If there's feeling, it comes through, but it is not intentionalized.
100%. Now, let me just get a sense for images like this are just on the right bottom and the left bottom are just incidentally emergent, or
Okay, so how this goes?
Yeah.
What you're looking at is a series of mistakes.
Yeah.
What I do is I paint around a locus.
Yeah.
We should move over to the other painting.
Yeah.
When you start a painting, it's always is wonderful because it's full of hope. But now I know, after all these decades of doing this, I don't have any hope anymore.
In other words, in the end, there's always an element of disappointment.
No, what I mean is that I used to start my paintings thinking it was a spring campaign. I get the troops out in April, I'd be back by August, done. No, it's not actually what happens. I have a spring campaign, but then the rains come in late August and I'm bogged down, and now I find myself in a winter campaign. And my tanks are going like this and the troops are freezing
So
to
you're
death.
coming back and back to the work. Never
So
spins as quickly.
I never, because in order for me to get for me to nail what I want to nail,
That it comes to life.
I make mistakes. So you know what this is like? Okay, this is like setting up a very complex slalom and getting down in one go. Okay? So I get down, so I lay it in, so I'm down, right? Then I climb up to the top of the hill. I'm going to go down again. But this slalom is different to regular slaloms because now there's a rut. On the second run, there's a rut.
Unexpected.
Well, no, it's always there. Like, I know it's always going to be there. The second run is going to...
But you were lucky you missed it the first time.
If I'm that lucky.
Yeah.
Well, there actually isn't a rut the first time, right? But the second time there's a rut. I'm in the fucking rut, right? And now I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to catch a tip, right? So now I have to go back up again. Now the rut's even worse. So what happens is there's a locus of where I know things to be. I come up here, I'm painting blind because I'm painting on instruments here. I don't know, I barely see what I'm doing. Then I have to step back and assess whether I keep this bit or get rid of this bit, right? And so in oil paint, you can just move stuff around, wipe it off, smear it, right? This stuff dries right away. So what you're looking at here is an aggregation of mistakes, okay? It's an aggregation of mistakes. Now what happens to the rut? Interestingly enough, it gets so deep that it turns into a bobsleigh run that is so deep that you don't need a rudder, you don't need anything. So the last pass down is glorious. Right, you just go. You can't.
Mistakes.
Yeah, you can't jump out. Right, it can't. You'll get down. Right.
You have no choice. The wax is fixed to the surface, and you've got to go with it.
At the end, when I'm at the end of the painting, or I'm in that last run, where I've nailed it and I can't fuck it up anymore. Okay, that's when I actually enjoy painting the painting. The rest, until then, it's just brutal.
And between hope and the final run,
there's no more hope. I have no more hope. I just know that I'm going to...
20% existential.
I'm just going to have to suffer this thing through until I get it. Now, if I were a better artist, I mean, if I had more talent, right, I wouldn't be suffering like this. But there you go.
Because you would do it faster
Well, I'd do it correctly.
the first time.
There'll be somebody who will come along and paint in encaustic, and will paint with the technologies of the 17th and 18th century, which I'm using, right? Which are the most sophisticated technologies in painting. And they'll be way more talented than me, and they'll just go boom.
Organic, sophisticated in the sense that
They'll just
when
be.
it mentions modern. You're saying 17th, 18th century nailed this
Well, I'm talking about.
technique in terms
To-
of materials.
I'm talking about what I call notational painting, right? Where the code is differentiated. Like if you look at an Ingres portrait, the code is not differentiated. You have colored surfaces and perspective. But if you look at a Velázquez or Van Dyck, you're going to get these marks, right? Each mark is different to every other mark. That's the nature of code, right? The code isn't a matrix. The code is A is different to B is different to C, and altogether
The image comes out.
we form a syntax, right? And this is an accruement, right, of these differences, right?
So would it be acceptable to say that your style has a certain kind of syntax to it?
It's all about syntax.
Generally and
It's all and only about syntax. That's all I care about.
And that's the uniqueness of the artist style.
I'm a heat-seeking missile for syntax. That's all I look at in life. I'm only looking at syntax.
Each mark has special meaning. And
No, it doesn't have special meaning.
It has.
No, it has nothing. It's just a mark
is.
trying to represent something, but it might have meaning. It might have meaning only if it finds itself operating as a sign within the syntax, right?
So syntax here means that mark in relationship to other marks together.
Everything in relation to everything else
A meaning
forms this is scalar, okay? So this is orders of magnitude, because we've got this happening up here, which is totally abstract, right? And as I back up, right, I suddenly see this woman, right? And now I have the title, which then forms the sign, because that's only the signifier, right? Lady Macbeth at Longchamp, right, is the title. Now it forms a sign, right? And now I look at the expression in her eyes and I think, oh, wait, something's up. Something's up. She's thinking about something, okay?
That's from back, from far away,
Yeah,
looking at the sign.
She's thinking about something in the painting, right? She, Lady Macbeth, is in that painting thinking. That's the difference between representation and real portraiture, right? The difference between a portrait that just copies your likeness is that there's no thinking sentient being on the other side of the picture plane. It's just a likeness, right? But real portraiture, right? And I'm going to say something that's so outrageously arrogant, but great portraiture, right, has a thinking, feeling being on the other side of the picture plane in the notional world, right? That's what we call a metaphor, right? Like Daffy Duck. Daffy Duck is the greatest metaphor of the 20th century. You got a bipolar English-speaking duck, okay? We see very little of him.
Even Lady Macbeth could relate.
Yeah, Daffy Duck, a few strokes of the pen, right? He has and why he's so wonderfully metaphorical is that he has a very small range of affect, right? He's either feeling really great or he's totally fucked, okay? And we think that we live in this world with a whole range of affect, but actually we don't, right? We're much closer to Daffy Duck than we can possibly imagine. That's why we love him so much. But he only exists in the cartoon in Daffy Duck land, right? An English-speaking bipolar duck can't exist in this reality, right? So my job is to create Daffy Duck,
So now-
except it's Lady Macbeth.
So now we're back here, she's the sign. Now you get to go back in.
She becomes a sign when she only becomes a sign. She doesn't have to become a sign.
Yeah.
If she's a weak painting, or if the title is weak, then it won't necessarily signify anything. But now you know it's Lady Macbeth, right? And you know the story of Lady Macbeth, right? Now you have the complete possibility of a sign.
But you do go from back there where you get the overall view back in and make additional moves in the light of your understanding of her from a distance. The feeling of the being of the whole. You're going to still make some changes.
Yeah, no, I make the
Sort of
changes
marks, the signs change.
because every time I walk into the room, there's something that isn't as good as it could be. And so when you ask me if that painting is finished, no, it's not finished. It's finished for now. If it stays with me for another year or two, it'll probably mutate.
Yes, there's a story of Degas wanting to take his paintings off the walls of his friends' homes to add a.
Yeah. But now this isn't really acting out. Okay, it could be acting out.
It's a search for completion.
Right. It's a search, not even for completion. It's a search for the. For me, it's the search for. Okay, so this is how it goes. I come in, I lay it down. At the end of the day, I go, yes. I come back the next day. I'm thinking, how the fuck could I have thought yes about this? This is a pile of crap, right? Now, what we have there is parallax, okay? I have this view. I come in the next day. My view is here.
Yeah.
Okay. As time goes on, through painting around these loci, right? One day I come in and there's no change. It looks as good as it did
Convergence.
the night. Okay, convergence. Now, that's when the painting actually starts. Because what my job is to
Give it life.
no, why are we going to say something else? My job is to push the parallax the other way, which actually means I walk in the next day and I think to myself, how did you do that? Christ, how did I do that? I could never do that. How did I do that? Because it's working better than I remembered it.
Now,
But I don't know how.
and let me ask you a final thing here.
Okay?
So we talk about these are signifiers. Now you're going back and forth. When you make your mark, is it a gesture? Does it have a spontaneous gestural quality?
No, I don't paint like this. Like, I don't paint like in the movies of people who paint, right?
Yeah.
Haha. I'm a feeling being. I'm a painter. Blah.
Right.
You know, here's my cosmic vomit. Yeah.
So you come in and
No, I go like this.
very selective.
Yeah, I know what I'm going to paint, and I paint it, and then when I've done it, I step back. There's no rapture.
So, I know, but those are spontaneous gestures. But the word spontaneous is taken carefully because they're guided by meanings and needs that you see on the surface.
The spontaneity is, I think when people use the term spontaneity, that's not actually what they mean. I think most of the time they mean that the body or the emotions have been allowed to run unfettered by the head.
But you mean, you're
Right.
talking about the existential 20%. Their gesture is not spontaneous in that sense, where it's a runaway thing. It has more control, it has more embodied, it's more relational.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this final phase of our conversation, we are going to talk a little bit about the art world, and I'm going to make a distinction between two kinds of art world. The art world of the people who go to the art gallery and sign the check and buy the work, and on the other hand, the art world of the curator at the museum who's making decisions about the collection, who's making decisions about what to use in a particular show. So give me your sense on that, please.
I would suggest that they're all part of the same thing. So where I would start is that of all the cultural productions in our civilization, what we call art is the only capital market. There's no other capital market. Right? Now, what I mean by that is that when you go to the cinema and you buy a ticket, you don't own equity in the film. The money you spend on your ticket may go back to refinance the movie industry, but you yourself don't own anything. Same with the ballet, same with when you buy a book, right? The actual value of the book, unless
It's only as a memory.
right? Well, it could be that.
Or
but
the
the point is
experience
that
in the moment.
it has absolutely no value in
Literal
terms of
takeaway
capital.
value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only art does, and it always has. So, why that's important is because the history of money and the history of art are absolutely the same history. It's a market of this capital. What the art world is just a very large shareholders convention.
I know a wealthy collector who said to me, he said, Cupchik, art's what you can get for it. Art is what you can get.
You see, somebody might hear that and go, oh my God, how right-wing, grotesque, whatever, right? But actually, see, for me, all these systems are happening at different scales all at the same time. And what he's saying is absolutely true in one aspect, right? But the art, so art has a capital value of what it's worth. The first valuation is whether it signifies anything in the culture, because that gives us its financial value, right? The financial value
Makes it a commodity.
yeah, the financial value, the asset value, is always comes after the place it has, right, in the structure of what the metaphysical structure of value.
So
right?
the people who will look at it, it means something to them in their particular time in the unfolding of the world.
And they will pay more for it than somebody else.
And for what reason will they do that?
Because it's a capital market.
But one person looks, another person looks, the third person in the auction buys.
Yeah.
Now there may be the desire to own, it may be just a competition with the other bidders,
Right.
but one would assume, one would hope, does in the top 20% of our existentials, that person has an attachment to that work.
Right.
And it is worth that much money to them.
Correct.
Now, but we were talking about also how markets fluctuate.
Exactly.
And say something about that, you know,
Well,
particularly
see,
in the
so
current age.
I mean, my thinking, first of all, is that artists aren't actually in the art world. We make capital, right? We make the capital, but we're like miners getting out diamonds, right? We're not on Fifth Avenue in the shop, right? That's the art world. The art world is the exchange in which this capital is valued, but the artist doesn't value and traded. But the artist does not create the value. The artist just creates art.
So,
right?
In bringing our conversation to a close, we've been talking for a couple of years now about cave painting. And we have the artist in the cave, who's not really an artist, a person with a vision that they're reifying or embodying on the surface, beginning to use materials. And now you're saying that nothing's really changed. The artist is in their own version of the cave we call the studio, producing things on their own. The question of whether it's valued or not is determined by other people.
Yeah, when I say on your own, things are changing in the art world, and there are things that are done not on your own anymore. But the basic idea, right, is still holds. Now, going to the distinction between the curators, what is a curator? A curator of the kind you mentioned, right, is somebody who is hired by the people as a custodian for the art that belongs to the people, right? That's the museum curators, right? Then you have curators of private collections, right? But all of this is socioeconomically connected, all of it, right? There is an idea, and this is one of the great problems of teaching art in universities, right? Is that we can't have this conversation in a university because the university is not mandated to discuss what you would discuss in a trade school, right? As though an art degree or an MFA wasn't a trade, as though it was
higher order,
lofty, whatever, right? And that in fact, you know, we see it all the time. Artists come out of MFA programs and it's like D-Day, right? Because they have no idea what they're going into.
It lies at the interface between the creative work of the artist and the realities of the world out there. So, in the end, we have Walter Benjamin's notion of aura and authenticity. We began our conversation with the 20% of the artists who are in the existential world, who are perceiving meaning and creating meaning and emerging meaning in the cave or otherwise, and then their products go into this other nexus that in a certain sense has aspects of bad faith. To the extent that they're able to make money off their art, it sustains them and is a basis for success.
No, it's all good. There's no bad faith. It's all good, but the art world at the moment is very much like the stock market was in 1720, just before the South Sea bubble blew up, right? In other words, after that, there were really strict regulations came in on how you could trade stocks, right? We don't have any regulations at the moment, but I can guarantee you, and it may not be in our lifetime, but it will happen, probably in our lifetime, that there will be an incredible crash in the art market because it's really bubblicious, right? It's been bubblicious for a while, and it's really insane relative to the rest of the economy, right? So we have asset inflation. We have hyperinflation in areas, not all, but in areas of the art world. So what's going to happen is some very big people, very important people are going to get hurt. And it's only when big people get hurt that you have regulations come in, right? It's never when little people get hurt, okay?
Well, some big people come in and they get rid of all the regulations. Not that we're timing this to Mr. Trump's era.
No, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Look, you want to be an art dealer? Oh, I'm an art dealer. You want to be an artist? Oh, I'm an artist. You want to be a consultant and take 20% from every trade? Oh, I'm a consultant. You have no body. There's no body even marginally regulating you. Now, that's what's great about the art world. It's full of creatures that feed off the host, right?
Literally, metaphorically, and
absolutely
with some religious element
I've known
as well.
some extraordinary people who are creatures of the art world. They don't actually do anything, They live off of 20% here, 10% there. They do a little curating. They do a little this, a little that. They feed off the public trough as much as they can, right? When museums have openings and have dinners, they go to all the dinners and all these, right? They're all around. They're fascinating people because they're all like very much like artists. They're people who've decided for the most part that they couldn't really have a job, right? So this is the next best. This is the best way to survive, right? So the art world is this kind of this amazing, and we, sometimes I think the art world is the price that artists pay for their talent, right? Artists are not in the art world, but we hang out in the art world to try to help the value
keep up. I'm looking for the big waves.
Yeah, and try, but in the end, I don't think we are, and I think that every relationship that an artist has with anybody in the art world is contingent on the value of their stock.
That's a good place to end.
Right? And that's true of artists in general.
What happens to authenticities here? We take the concept and put it back in the vault. The notion of, so we've established that aura is something that fluctuates in an economy where things can be manipulated. And in a certain sense, the artist's talent and mystery recedes into the background a little bit in this kind of conversation.
I don't know. I think generally the art world celebrates the best. Right? Well, let me give you the corollary. There are virtually no unknown geniuses
in the art world,
in the history of art. Occasionally somebody is found, and there's a revisionist history, right, that will bring them to the fore when they were mostly ignored during their time, and conversely, there are superstars of their time that get relegated to the afternoon or morning auctions.
The cauldron is continually
constantly. However,
evolving.
The very best of its time, right, is there.
Thank you very much for the conversation. Much appreciated.
Good.
We dealt with all the nuances of the creative artist, the existential notion, the special mark and gesture, and finally the art world itself.